It was the sort of rain that settled in for the night, thick and silver and slow, soaking through shingles and sorrow alike. The wind moved in lazy sighs over the porch rails, and the only light came from the flicker of a kerosene lamp beside a spinning needle. Delia Monroe sat hunched over a cradle of patched denim, her fingers mending what others would throw away. The fire crackled behind her. The world didn't come calling anymore, and she'd made peace with that. Her hair, once gold as barley, now stayed pinned and practical, streaked with the dull ash of too many silent years. 32, and yet she wore her solitude like an older woman wore mourning, tight at the throat, in black creases no smile dared cross. There was no laughter in this cabin. Only thread, wood, fire, and the kind of silence that got inside a person. Outside, the storm swelled. The fields beyond the window blurred into gray memory, and Delia rocked in rhythm with the rain. She'd learned to count time not by calendars or bells, but by the rise and fall of thunder, by the sound of her own breath while the world kept its distance. The last knock at her door had come 3 winters ago, and it hadn't been kind. That night, she was about to bank the fire and set the latch when it happened, a sound soft enough to be mistaken for imagination. One knock, then another. Hesitant. Not the kind of knock men used when they came calling for debts or judgment. No, this was the kind that carried shame. Delia froze. She stared at the door as if it might vanish. Her heart, long accustomed to stillness, began to stir like coals nudged by wind. Another knock, and this time something else. Was that crying? She opened the door. Rain and wind swept in, carrying the sharp scent of horses and road dust turned to mud. A man stood there, dripping, hunched, arms full. "Please," he said, breathless. "They just need milk." Delia blinked. There, bundled in wet blankets clutched to his chest, were 3 infants, 2 girls and a boy, no more than a month old. Their cries tangled with the storm, thin and starving and soaked to the bone. His arms trembled beneath them. He was gaunt, his boots caked in red clay, face shadowed beneath a battered hat. Delia said nothing at first. Words had always come late for her, and this moment felt too heavy for any she had ready. "I don't need nothing else," he added, eyes cast down like a child expecting scorn. "Just milk. I'll go after." She looked past him into the darkness, as if the rain might explain why God had sent this stranger to her doorstep when she hadn't spoken his name in years. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. He hesitated, then crossed the threshold like a man trespassing on sacred ground. The door shut behind him with a hollow clunk. The cabin felt smaller now, filled with the heat of crying babies, and a man who smelled of desperation and road dust. Delia took the smallest girl from his arms without asking and cradled her against her chest, the way a woman does when memory moves her hands faster than thought. "Sit," she said. The man dropped to the edge of the rocking chair, clutching the other 2 infants as if they might vanish. Rain dripped from his sleeves. His eyes never left the flames dancing in the hearth, as if ashamed to meet hers. Delia vanished into the back room, and the old nanny goat bleated from her stall. Within minutes she returned with a warm bottle, already dampening a cloth, to wrap the child's trembling hands. The baby drank like she'd been waiting for it all her life. "She's strong," Delia murmured. The man nodded, still silent. After feeding each one, gently, rhythmically, with murmured hushes and the calm of someone who once knew how, Delia laid them in a crate lined with wool and tucked under the windowsill. Only then did she speak again. "They yours?" He nodded once. "Sisters. She died birthing the 3rd. Delia didn't ask what happened to the father. Some questions announced themselves in what isn't said. Instead, she moved to hang his coat by the fire, her fingers brushing the frayed hem of his sleeve. "What's your name?" she asked. Bo Riggins. From down San Miguel way." "You walked far." He swallowed. "Didn't plan to stop. Folks said this road passed through some farms. You were the only light still burning." Delia returned to her chair, pulled a wool shawl across her lap, and watched the babies. Sleep had found them fast. They looked so peaceful now, mouths slack, cheeks flushed, as if hunger had never touched them. "I don't got nothing to pay you with," Bo said softly, as though he were ashamed of even sitting dry beside her fire. "I didn't ask for pay." He stared into the hearth. Still. Delia folded her hands. Most folk wouldn't knock on a stranger's door in a storm unless something precious was on the edge of dying. He didn't answer. His jaw worked as though he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. "You can stay," she said. Just the night. We'll sort the rest tomorrow." Bo turned toward her. His eyes were pale, gray-blue like river stone, and rimmed red from days without sleep. There was a silence between them, not awkward but full, like a sky before snow. "You sure?" he asked. "No one else knocks," she replied. She stood and banked the fire, letting the lamp burn low. Then she laid out blankets on the floor near the stove and left him there, sitting in the hush with his sleeping burdens. In her room, Delia sat on the edge of her bed and touched the wool shawl still wrapped around her shoulders. Her fingers drifted to her belly, flat now for years, but never empty of the ache. She remembered when her hands had moved like that for her own child, the one she buried in a patch of wildflowers on the North Ridge, where no one from town had come. She'd been called many things since then, fool, fallen whore, but never mother. Not since. The rain thickened, drumming the roof like memory. Through the thin walls, the soft breathing of infants mingled with the steady whisper of a man who hadn't yet learned how to pray out loud. And still, despite everything, the cabin felt fuller. Delia lay down, eyes open, breath shallow. Something had shifted. Not loudly, just enough. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, brushing the porch rails like fingers trying to find a familiar hand. And inside, in the corner cradle, 3 tiny chests rose and fell in time with her own. Tomorrow there would be questions. Town talk. Maybe worse. But tonight, a man had knocked, and she had opened the door. That was enough. For now. The morning crept in quietly, like a hand brushing the dew from wheat stalks. A haze hung over the prairie, soft and silver, as if the night's sorrow had not quite lifted. Inside Delia's cabin, the scent of warm milk and ash lingered thick in the air. The storm had passed, but left its trace in the bowed porch railings and the puddles glinting in the rut path outside. Chickens scratched noisily in the mud, unconcerned by the human dramas stirring indoors. Delia stood barefoot by the stove, sleeves rolled, stirring a pan of goat's milk with a wooden spoon. She moved slow, deliberate, as if too much noise might wake some sorrow she'd only just coaxed to sleep. The triplets lay side by side on folded wool, tiny fists curled and faces slack with peace, their cheeks flushed with the color of fullness. Their bellies rose in tandem, little engines of life humming in their dreams. Bo Riggins sat on the bench near the hearth, elbows on knees, head in hands. His hat lay forgotten on the floor, soaked through and drying crooked near the embers. He hadn't spoken yet, not beyond a whispered thanks, when Delia handed him a blanket before dawn. Now he stared at the cracks in her floorboards like they might spell out the map of what came next. "You're not eatin'," Delia said, her voice calm as creek water. Bo blinked and straightened. "Ain't rightly sure I could keep it down." "I didn't ask if you could," she replied. "You still need to." He managed a thin smile, then took the cup of milk she offered. It steamed faintly, warm and earthy. Bo sipped it slow, like a man unused to warmth, not tied to fever. "I thought I might ride out after they've rested spell," he said. Delia set the pan aside and turned toward him. Her gaze was unreadable, softened only by the morning light falling through the lace-curtained window. "Go where?" He shrugged. "Find some place that'll take some mission house. Or a ranch family with a heart big enough." "You think that's what they need?" she asked. He hesitated. "They need more than me." "You brought them this far." "Barely." Delia walked past him and knelt beside the babies. One stirred, a whimper escaping as her foot kicked the wool away. Delia tucked it back gently, brushing a curl from a girl's forehead. Her fingers moved with such care, it startled Bo into silence. "I lost mine," she said, not looking up. "A girl. Born early. Didn't last the night." Bo stared at her, words caught in his throat. "They buried her on a ridge where violets grow wild." Her voice didn't tremble, but the stillness in her made the room hold its breath. "No one came but me. And the wind." A long silence passed between them. Bo cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." Delia stood, brushing dust from her apron. "Don't be. You didn't leave me pregnant and vanishing." He looked up sharply. That sentence landed like a stone in water, sharp, sinking, undeniable. But she didn't seem bitter. Just honest. A woman with no patience left for soft lies. Outside, hooves echoed down the muddy road. A cart rolled by slowly. Delia didn't look, but she knew the gossip was already stirring. Her window hadn't been lit in years, and now a man had stayed the night. They'll talk, Bo muttered, as if ashamed for her sake. They've been talking since I buried her alone, she said. Let M. Bo rubbed a hand over his jaw. He looked rough, like a man carved from bark, scraped, scarred, and still somehow standing. But there was no hardness in him now, just the thin quiet of someone who'd run out of defenses. I'm not a skin for more, he said. Truly, I didn't come to lay burdens. Delia looked at him for a long moment. You didn't, she said. You brought 3 reasons for me to remember how to breathe. He blinked, taken aback. I don't know what to say to that. You don't need to. The babies stirred again. Delia fetched 3 cloth diapers from the shelf and began folding them with deft, practiced hands. The rhythm of her movements calmed even Bo, who found himself watching her more than the fire. You said your sister passed birthing the 3rd, Delia said not unkindly. Bo nodded slow. Sadie. She was barely 20. Her man died in a mining collapse 6 months before. She stayed with me out on the edge of the hill country. But when the time came, no midwife, no help. Just me. He rubbed his eyes with a shaking hand, held her hand and prayed. But prayers ain't got hands. Delia said nothing, only kept folding. Sometimes silence held more comfort than words. I buried her under a cypress tree, Bo added. Didn't mark it. Felt like if I didn't, I could pretend she'd just gone off somewhere better. Delia finally looked up. She didn't leave you. She left them. That struck him hard. He nodded, eyes burning now, the guilt raw in the light. I couldn't feed M, he whispered. I was stealing milk from pastures, robbing hen houses. They cried all night, Delia. I thought they might die in my arms. But they didn't. No. She stepped forward and took the cup from his hand. Their fingers brushed, brief but electric with something unnamed, kinship, maybe. A shared ache. Bo swallowed hard. I should go. Leave before it's worse for you. You're not going anywhere until they're strong enough to scream without shaking, she said, her voice like warm flannel. You walk through rain with 3 mouths to feed. That's not shame. That's proof. Proof that you're not just bloodkin. You're a father now. He looked down at his hands, the calluses, the dirt under his nails, the tremble that never fully left. I don't know how to be one. Then we'll learn together. It came out before she'd thought through the offer, but it felt true. Bo stared at her as if she'd just handed him something fragile and sacred. Outside, the wind picked up. The rain had passed, but the world still hadn't made up its mind about sun or storm. A knock rattled the door. Delia stiffened. Bo moved instinctively to the babies, shielding them. She opened the door. Mrs. Klein stood there, lips pinched, shawl clutched like a flag of righteousness. Didn't want to believe it, she said, eyes flicking to the man behind Delia. But the whole street saw his boots on your porch. You ain't changed a bit, Delia Monroe. Delia didn't flinch. There's 3 children sleeping in that room, she said, quiet and firm. And if you have nothing to offer but venom, you can keep your tongue behind your teeth. Mrs. Klein sniffed. The pastor will hear of this. I hope he does. The door closed with a thud that echoed through the stillness. Bo stood frozen, unsure whether to speak or hide. Delia exhaled slowly. I'll go to town tomorrow, she said. Get more cloth, maybe some goat's feed. We're running low. You sure? Let them talk. They always have. But now I've got something to feed that ain't just sorrow. Bo watched her walk back to the stove, stir the pan again, ladle the milk into 3 bottles. In the corner, a baby cooed, reaching into empty air, and Delia caught her hand before it could fall. Something changed then, barely noticeable. Bo stepped closer. Just 1 step. And for the first time in years, Delia didn't step back. The sun broke over the hills like a secret told too late, warm, golden, and unable to undo what had come before. The land steamed where yesterday's rain had soaked it through, and in the garden behind Delia's cabin, green things pushed upward in quiet defiance. Life, it seemed, didn't ask permission. Inside, the cabin was full of movement. Not loud, not frantic, but full. Bo chopped kindling near the back stoop, sleeves rolled to the elbow, while Delia hummed beneath her breath, washing cloths in a basin warmed by morning sun. The triplets lay in a circle on a wool blanket, their soft giggles filling the room like birdsong. There was a rhythm to it now, feeding, washing, holding, resting. A rhythm they had not agreed on but had grown into. Bo hadn't left. He tried to say he would twice, but both times the words faded somewhere between his chest and his tongue, replaced by the gentle clatter of bottles and the rustle of clean linen. That morning, he handed her a bundle of fresh wood and glanced toward town. "We'll need more supplies," he said. "Can't keep borrowing sugar from ghosts." Delia nodded. "I'll go." He hesitated. "Folks are talking. They always do. But now they're listening, too." She looked up. "To who?" "Your father, mostly." Delia's hands paused in the water. Steam curled up around her fingers like smoke. "I figured," she said. "The walk to town was longer than it used to feel. Maybe it was the eyes watching from porches. Maybe it was the space between herself and those memories, the ones carved into the church pews, the mercantile shelves, the dirt path behind the schoolhouse where she used to sing. Now they looked at her as if she'd returned from some far-off sin. Her skirts brushed mud. Her boots struck stone. She kept her chin high. At the general store, Mrs. Keeler frowned when Delia placed 2 extra milk bottles on the counter. "Sure you need that much?" the woman asked, voice syrupy but sharp. Delia folded her coin on the counter without replying. In the back corner, near the barrel of dried apples, 2 women whispered. "That's him, ain't it? The man she's keepin'. With 3 babies? And her not married. She was always trouble. Remember that business with young Calvin Jenkins? Just disappeared, he did." Delia didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. She knew the shape of cruelty in women's voices better than she knew her own reflection. As she stepped back out into the sun, a shadow crossed her path. Pastor Harlan Monroe. Her father. He stood taller than she remembered. Or maybe it was just the weight he carried now. Authority, righteousness, and a deep, abiding disappointment that showed even in the lines of his coat. "Delia," he said. "Not warmly." "Pastor," she replied. "You're keeping company with a stranger under your roof." "I'm feeding hungry children." His mouth twitched, not quite a frown. "Not quite anything human. There are proper places for orphans," he said. "Sanctioned homes. Foundations with moral structure." Delia met his gaze. "Where were those structures when I bled alone in my own bed and you wouldn't answer the door?" The silence that followed was not quiet. It roared in her ears, filled her chest, echoed down the church steps. He did not flinch, nor did he offer excuse. "You are not their mother," he said. "I am now." He stepped aside without blessing or farewell. Just the rustle of his robe, and the stale scent of brimstone pride. By the time she returned to the cabin, Bo was pacing, a baby slung over one shoulder, shirt half-buttoned in panic, written across his jaw. "I was about to ride after you." "Sorry," Delia said softly, unpacking the bag. "Ran into my father." Bo raised his brows. Did he raise his voice? "No," she said. "That's how I know he's still dangerous." She handed him a new pacifier. He blinked at it, then laughed under his breath. "You're something else." That night, one of the babies, May, the middle girl, ran hot with fever. Delia noticed it just after sundown. Bo touched her forehead and swore under his breath. They traded the girl between them for hours, dabbing cool cloths and whispering lullabies. Delia sang a tune her mother used to hum while braiding her hair, a song about starlight and safe places. Bo listened, his hand resting on the baby's back, gaze tracing the shape of Delia's face in lamplight. "Sadie used to sing," he murmured. "Off-key, but sweet. She sounds like she was brave." She was. And scared. Delia nodded. Most brave things are. At dawn, the fever broke. May slept easy again. Bo slumped back in the chair, chest rising with relief. Delia leaned in the doorway, the lamp now cold and dim. "You look like someone who's been through a war," she said. Bo smiled. "Maybe I have." A knock came at midday. Louder this time. Not ashamed. Delia opened the door to find 2 men, Sheriff Dalton and a wiry clerk from the county office. "Afternoon, Miss Monroe," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Got some questions about the children." Delia stepped aside. Bo rose to his feet, instinct already taut in his shoulders. "Concern was raised about their welfare," the clerk said. "Said they might be in a situation that lacks moral clarity." Bo stepped forward. "They're my blood. My sisters. I didn't abandon them." "No one's accusing," the sheriff said gently. "But you gotta understand, it's not just about being kin. There's process. Law." Delia's voice didn't waver. "They're fed. Warm. Clean. And loved. What else do you need?" The clerk looked uncomfortable. "There's a hearing in a week. You'll both need to appear." Bo stood taller, and until then, the sheriff looked between them, then at the babies playing in the corner, laughing with their whole bodies. "They stay," he said, "but you best be ready." After they left, Delia sat beside Bo on the porch, her dress brushing his trousers. "They mean well," he muttered, "but meaning ain't enough." Delia watched the wind ripple across the prairie grass. "We'll fight, not with fists, but with presence." Bo tilted his head. "Presence. Showing up," she said, "again and again, till even the gossip wears out." Bo chuckled. "That may take years. I'm not going anywhere." He looked at her, and for the first time since arriving, his gaze didn't flinch. "I don't deserve this," he said. Delia turned to him, her face calm. "None of us do. That's the cost of mercy. We give it anyway." In the doorway behind them, the triplets babbled nonsense. Their voices rose like little bells into the quiet. Bo reached over and gently, without fanfare, rested his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Above them, the sky rolled wide and blue, and on the horizon, dust stirred, someone else coming, or maybe the next storm. Either way, they would meet it together. Spring crept in with a whisper instead of a shout. Buds peeked shyly from bare branches, and the fields beyond Delia's cabin shimmered with the promise of green. The days were longer now, filled with birdsong and soft footsteps, the kind that didn't leave behind suspicion or shame. Inside, the cabin had changed in ways no town record would ever mark. The floor gleamed with scrubbed wood, and the hearth bore signs of quiet evenings. Bo's boots beside the fire, a half-whittled horse he carved in spare hours, Delia's embroidery left unfinished on the table, as if she'd meant to return and never quite did. The triplets had grown louder, sturdier, and full of mischief. Joy spilled from them like sap from new bark. The garden sprouted thin green shoots, thanks to Bo's steady hands and Delia's quiet planning. He didn't speak of leaving any more. She no longer watched the road for someone to return. They had settled into something neither had named, too tender for claim, too real to deny. But the town had not softened with the season. It began with the bread. A basket of it, still warm, left on the front step without a note. Delia stared at it as if it might bite. Bo examined the stitching on the cloth wrapping, familiar, faded blue. Pastor Harlan's wife. No words, but something had shifted. Then came the boots. A pair of children's boots, well-worn, polished, left hanging by a nail on the gate. No name, no claim. Delia brought them inside without comment. She knew a silent apology when she saw one. And still, there were the others. The eyes watching from church windows. The whispers behind hands in the mercantile. No act of kindness erased memory in a place where people measured sin by the length of a woman's silence. Bo returned from town one afternoon with a scowl heavy on his face and a letter crumpled in his fist. "It's from my aunt in Kansas," he said, voice like gravel. "I thought maybe she'd take them. Blood and all." Delia turned from the stove, wiping her hands. And he dropped the letter on the table. She unfolded it with care. The words inside were cold, sharp, and final. "They ain't my burden. Nor yours if you're smart. That kind of woman don't raise children, she ruins them." Delia didn't flinch. She refolded the letter and slid it into the stove without a word. Flames took it greedily. Bo watched the fire devour his last thread of family. "I'm sorry." "For what?" she asked, turning back to the pot. "For hoping. For bringing them here. For bringing this to you." Delia stirred slow, the spoon circling like a thought she wasn't ready to voice. "You didn't bring ruin. You brought life. And they brought something I thought I'd buried." Bo lowered himself onto the bench, watching the babies play in the corner with a rusted spoon and a threadbare doll. "We need to make it official. Adoption papers. Something legal. I thought we couldn't. We can try. I've got a friend who knew a clerk up in Canyon Bluff. Said sometimes papers move faster when the town ain't watching." Delia nodded. "Then let's send the letter." 2 days later, the reply came not in a letter, but in the form of a carriage rolling down the prairie road, raising a ribbon of dust behind it. Delia watched from the porch, hands on her hips, heart suddenly too loud in her chest. Bo stepped out beside her, wiping flour from his palms. "They're early," he murmured. The carriage stopped. A woman in gray stepped down, followed by a man in a county suit with a leather folio tucked beneath his arm. "Investigator," the man said briskly, showing a badge with the pride of someone unused to refusal. "We'll need to assess the living conditions and speak with both guardians." Bo stiffened. Delia lifted her chin. "Come in." The woman walked slowly through the cabin, taking in the cradle, the kitchen, the garden through the window. She nodded faintly as Delia described feeding schedules, teething habits, and sleeping arrangements. She asked few questions, but her silence said she was noting everything. The man, meanwhile, flipped through his folio, pausing only to scrawl a few lines when Bo explained how long he'd been caring for the children. "No marriage certificate between you two," he noted. "No," Delia said. "Unrelated by blood." "Yes." He frowned. "And you want to co-adopt?" "We're raising them together," Bo said, voice steady. The man clicked his pen closed. "We'll need to confer with the local court. Decision comes in 3 days." When they left, Bo sat down hard on the porch step. His shoulders sagged like canvas sacks left too long in the rain. "I didn't like the way he looked at you," he muttered. Delia leaned beside him, wrapping a shawl over her arms. "He looked like a man who's used to seeing lies. And he thinks we're one." She turned to him. "Are we?" Bo looked at her, really looked. Her face was wind-worn, sun-freckled, lined with things no mirror could reflect. There was nothing pretty about her grief, but it had become something holy. She was not a woman playing house. She was a woman rebuilding a world from ashes. "No," he said. "We're truth. It just don't look like what they expect." That night, the sky shifted. Clouds drifted like wandering herds. The wind stirred the grass in long, sweeping breaths. Delia stood by the crib long after the babies had fallen asleep, brushing her hand across May's hair, listening to the tick of the cooling stove and the distant call of an owl. Behind her, Bo spoke quietly. "Do you ever think of what this would have looked like, if it had started different?" She turned. "All the time. But we don't choose the fire. Only whether we let it burn us down, or make something new." He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough she could feel the warmth from his chest. "I didn't expect to find you. I didn't expect to be found." The silence between them stretched, not empty but full, like a held breath waiting to exhale. Then the babies stirred in their sleep, murmuring soft nonsense. Bo smiled, stepping back. Delia exhaled, letting the moment pass. They both knew what waited on the road behind the sunrise. A verdict neither of them could control. But tonight, the cabin stood warm. The garden held promise. The babies dreamt safe and full-bellied. And outside, the wind had changed, no longer biting and sharp, but cool and rising, like breath before a song. The rain came back the morning of the hearing, not with fury, but with patience, steady, soft, and sure, like it had nowhere else to be. It tapped on the window panes and silvered the porch, washing the dust from the clapboards and soaking the sleeves of the only Sunday dress Delia still owned. She didn't complain. Rain had always been part of her story. Bo buttoned his cleanest shirt with shaking hands, the cuffs still fraying, the collar too stiff from starch. He'd shaved with a knife that morning, missed a spot, cut his chin. But he stood straight. Not because he believed they'd win, but because if they didn't, he needed to know he'd fought for something worth breaking over. The triplets were unusually quiet, as if they could feel the shift in the air. Delia dressed them in soft white smocks she'd sewn herself, her fingers steady even as her heart knocked like a loose shutter in wind. She tied ribbons in the girls' hair and brushed the boys' curls flat, whispering their names like a litany, May, Ruth, Eli. Each name sacred, each face a reason. Bo watched her from the doorway, hands clenched. "You don't have to speak. I can tell the story." But Delia shook her head. "It's my story too now." They rode to town in Joe Bixby's cart, the old man saying nothing as the wheels clattered over wet stones. He only gave Delia a nod when she helped Bo lift the babies in. A nod full of something heavier than approval, respect maybe, or belief. At the courthouse, the room was already half full. Wooden pews groaned beneath the weight of judgment. Pastor Harlan sat in the front row, stiff as a tombstone, his wife beside him, lips pursed like she was holding back a hymn, or a curse. Delia held one baby in her arms, Bo another, the third asleep in a borrowed cradle at their feet. The county official from last week entered with a stack of files, followed by a woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes that flicked too quickly. The matter at hand, the judge began, voice like a cracked bell, concerns the guardianship of 3 minors presently in the care of Miss Delia Monroe and Mr. Bo Riggins. He adjusted his glasses and looked over the top of them, as if the paper before him might lie. But people could not. "We have records. Testimonies. But I want to hear it plain." Bo stood. His voice was rough at first, then steadied. He told of Sadie, of her death in childbirth, of walking through mud with 3 howling mouths and no future to offer them. He told of knocking on a stranger's door in the rain. Delia didn't look at the crowd. She watched Beau's hands, how they never trembled when he held a child, how his shoulders only shook when he thought they couldn't see. When the judge turned to her, she rose slowly. Her dress clung damp at the hem. Her voice was low but clear. "I was alone for a long time," she said. "Not by choice. I made mistakes. Or at least, I let others write the story of them." Her gaze brushed her father's face. He didn't blink. "But when those children cried," she continued, "something inside me remembered. Not pity, not charity, just knowing that I couldn't let them go hungry. That love, even if borrowed, might still be enough." There was a hush in the room. Even the judge didn't shift in his chair. "I didn't set out to be their mother," she said, "but I became one by doing it, rocking them, feeding them, rising when they cried, loving them every time someone else looked away." A woman in the back sniffled. Someone cleared their throat. The judge glanced over his papers again, then nodded to the clerk, who stood and read a short statement, legal words, thick with clauses. The children would remain under Delia and Beau's care until formal review, pending approval of adoption documentation. But that wasn't the verdict. Not yet. Then the judge paused. "Do you intend to raise them together?" Beau stood again. "Yes, sir." "Married?" "Not yet." A ripple ran through the room. The judge peered down. "Why not?" Beau turned toward Delia. For a moment, all the noise fell away. Even the rain stilled. "I didn't know if I was allowed to ask," he said. Delia's breath caught. Not from surprise. From the truth in it. "You don't have to," she said, walking to him slowly, the baby still in her arms. "We already did. Every morning we rose, we said yes." He stepped toward her. "But I want to," he said, softer now. "If you'll have me." The triplets cooed between them. And in the silence that followed, no one dared interrupt. The judge leaned back with a tired smile. "Then raise them. Together. On paper or off, I don't much care. Just don't forget what it costs to choose each other." He tapped the gavel. "So ordered." Outside, the rain still fell, but lighter now, almost gentle. The crowd drifted away slowly, some casting curious glances, others soft smiles. Pastor Harlan remained seated long after the room emptied. When he finally rose, he passed his daughter without a word. But just before he stepped outside, he turned back and gave her a single, slow nod. Not approval, not forgiveness, but recognition, the kind that takes years to earn. They rode home in the same cart, the babies asleep on their laps, the sky crackling open in patches of gold. Delia leaned into Beau's shoulder. His hand found hers beneath the shawl. "We did it," he whispered. "No," she said. "We started it." Back at the cabin, she hung her shawl by the door. The fire was out, but the warmth lingered. Beau set the babies down in their cradle, one by one. Outside, thunder rolled distant, comforting now, like a lullaby sung by the land itself. Later, Delia stood at the threshold, watching rain bead off the eaves, her hand on the doorframe like someone blessing a home. Beau came to stand beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She turned to him, her voice barely louder than the hush of rain. Sometimes love don't come with a wedding band or grand gesture. Sometimes it shows up, soaking wet, begging for milk. And you feed it, and you keep feeding it, until one day you realize you've become a family. He smiled. And under that slow, steady rain, they stepped back inside, where the fire would be lit again, where 3 small dreams now breathed in harmony, and where mercy, once a stranger, had found its place by the hearth.